Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news around Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. It's fascinating to hear what they were talking about as well as how they spoke in their articles from over 100 years ago. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the articles from this week in 1920. Some potato growers were flim-flammed. Potato growers who were caught by the February floods and had to replant later overjoyed at the fine prospects around the middle of May of maturing a splendid crop. Prices were high and the situation looked exceedingly rosy. Then the rainy period set in, changing the entire situation. It now appears that those growers who shipped during the rainy spell sold out at unusually high prices and considered themselves most fortunate. Now comes the unsatisfactory part of the story in the returns, which are beginning to be received. Some severe criticism is being heaped upon the commission houses in the north, who seem to have taken advantage of the appearance of some rot in shipments to condemn entire carloads. Instances have come to light after some of the Hastings and Elkton farmers became suspicious of the reports of cars having to be dumped, and they hastened to the cities where these cars were being unloaded, only to find that while there were a few spoiled potatoes in the shipments, on the whole, they had been unloaded and marketed at a big price. One grower is said to have saved himself $6,000 by a trip to a northern city. The farmers of the potato belts are now beginning to plan some method where their shipments can be inspected and checked on arrival at the destination, so as to prevent a recurrence of this season's very unsatisfactory procedure. New forage crop should be very valuable locally. G.C. Middleton, a practical farmer of St. Johns County who is now doing some experimenting on the homestead farms of Mrs. L. Carruthers and her son Guy on Anastasia, has demonstrated the success with which the shallow or Egyptian wheat can be grown in this vicinity. Shallow, Mr. Middleton explained, is a far more useful crop than Kaffir corn as a forage crop. He showed samples of both, and the basis for this was readily seen. The corn grows with the tops closely matted together, and before it is ready to be cut, it is usually webby. The shallow grows in loose, open bunches and has splendid keeping qualities. Jacksonville has started campaign to get rid of rats. With the arrival of Dr. M.F. Harrelson of the United States Public Health Service and expert rat catchers, the anti-rat campaign was launched in earnest. The health authority and city officials are working with a seriousness that ensures the success of their endeavor. At a conference Monday afternoon, it was decided that 10 men should be employed to give their entire time to rat catching under the direction of the government expert. Dr. Harrelson advised those present that at least 5,000 rats should be examined to determine whether or not there's plague in the city. Not a moment is being lost in getting the machinery started, and many rats have already been examined at the State Health Laboratory. The examiners are pleased to state that no suspicious cases have been discovered. Hole in bridge. There is a hole in the Cracker Branch Bridge on the Palatka Road, one approximately 18 inches in length and 6 inches wide. All indications also point to other holes that will soon break through. Shooting manatee. In St. Augustine, a large herd of manatee or sea cows in local waters for the past several weeks may be seen from the seawall almost any time of day. The herd grazes at different parts of the bay from the vicinity of the Old Arsenal to Fort Marion and even further north. It's reported that several parties have been seen shooting at the manatee, and lovers of the curious creatures fear such practice will drive the sea cows away and have vigorously protested to the authorities on the grounds that the manatee are a curiosity of great interest to winter visitors and therefore should not be frightened away by sportsmen. Now it's time for this week's Talk of the Times, when we take a look back at what people were talking about over 100 years ago. This week in 1920, folks about town were talking about a new local driving speed record. The article is titled, "Establish New Auto Record," and it reads, There was a great general inclination to doubt the veracity of the story published in the Times-Union Sunday, which told of the establishment of a new auto record for automobiles between Jacksonville and Miami. Ken Goodson, Jacksonville boy driving in Essex, left Jacksonville at midnight Wednesday, reaching Daytona in just 2 hours and 30 minutes. This certainly shatters all records between the two cities because the ordinary trip between St. Augustine and Daytona consumes from 3 to 3.5 hours. Of course, the trip having been made during the night, there were no delays due to meeting automobiles and trucks. And the main risk the driver ran into was from cattle on the Dixie Highway. This rate of speed indicates they must have made St. Augustine in about 40 minutes from South Jacksonville. Stewart was reached at 6:30 a.m. and Miami at 8:31 a.m., making the running time exactly 8 hours and 31 minutes, the distance of 384 miles. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. Now it's time for this week's musical memory, when we listen back to a song that everyone was listening to over 100 years ago. This week we have a song that almost became a state song. It was recorded back in 1924 and was used in the Broadway musical Bombo, starring Al Jolson. The tune was used repeatedly in movies and TV shows over the years, but perhaps one of the most unique uses of it was that a subterfuge. When the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown was heading to the Battle of Midway from Pearl Harbor, they knew the U.S. forces were greatly outnumbered, so they needed to use the element of surprise. They acted like they weren't heading to Midway by playing this song loudly to make any Japanese agents keeping watch think the mood on the ship was a more festive one, and the ship was heading back to the mainland from Pearl Harbor, not heading toward Midway to take part in the battle. It's also a song that's been the choice of presidents past. Richard Nixon ordered, if he were to die in office, this song should be played slowly and softly at his funeral. And when President Reagan left Washington, D.C. in 1989, it was played as he boarded Air Force One. So let's take a listen back to Al Jolson with the Isham Jones Orchestra and California, Here I Come.
When the wind freezes, winds are blowing, and the snow is starting in to fall, then my eyes turn westward, knowing that's the place that I love best of all. California, I've been blue since I've been away from you. I can't wait till I get going. Even now, I'm starting in the call. Oh, California, here I come, right back where I started from, where bowers of flowers bloom in the sun. Each morning, that dawning bird is singing everything a sun said, don't be late. That's why I can hardly wait. Open up your golden gate, California, here I come. Right back where I started from, where bowers of flowers bloom in the sun. Each morning that dawning bird is singing everything a sun said, don't be late. That's why I can hardly wait. Open up your golden gate, California, here I come. California, here I come, right back where I started from, where bowers of flowers bloom in the sun. Each morning that dawning bird is singing Get everything a sun kissed miss said. Don't be late. That's why I can hardly wait. Open up your Golden Gate, California.